friend James. He is the author of Unnoticed Entrepreneur, and he has also 3 decades of experience in building products and businesses, right? And across 3 continents. Did I get that right?
Yes, that's right. I've been living in Singapore, China, set up a business also in India, and now back in Europe.
Wow, wow. So just to set the stage for this podcast, for the listeners, I want to extract as much from you, Jim. Like kind of like a teaser of what they will possibly get from your book. So there's a volume one, volume two. Before we even go a bit there, you want to add a bit more about yourself, like how did you get to there? Then we can, go from there.
Imran, thank you so much for inviting me on to the show. And I'm over here in the UK. I think you're on the west coast of the USA, aren't you? So thank you so much for reaching out. And yeah, basically, I jumped out of an aeroplane at the age of 17 and realized in that, 2 minutes of sheer fear, to be honest, that you can make money out of creating something. That being an entrepreneur is a bit thrilling, a bit scary, but it's a lot more lucrative than staying on the ground and working for other people. So that was my first experience, really, taking a risk, making something happen, and raising money. And that's been the call sign for my life ever since. I moved to Singapore at the age of 28 to start my first business, EastWest Public Relations. And then I moved to China in 2006 to start the offices there and opened a number of other businesses, including importing sports cars, and had a role as the CEO for Lotus sports cars, which some of your listeners may have heard of, and a few other bits before moving back to the UK, 2019, where I started my podcast, The Unnoticed
Mhm.
Entrepreneur, resulted in publishing one book, which was The Unnoticed Entrepreneur Volume 1, picked up by Wiley, Unnoticed Entrepreneur Volume 2 coming out in May of this year. So I'm now a full-time podcast host and live show host for some brands and publisher and a business coach, really, Imran. So based here in the UK, but love life and have been lucky to live it all over the world, because I also went to university in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So that's my sort of
Wow.
57 years wrapped up in a minute.
That's very impressive. And I think there's a lot to unpack in limited time that we have. So let's start with jumping out of the plane, right? So um you were 17. So you're referring to skydiving. Just want to be sure. You were
Yeah,
in
they
this
call
flying
it.
commercial plane. You're like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna jump out.
Yeah, no, it was a planned exit from the plane. They call it
Okay.
static line jumping. But yes,
Okay.
and I had a piece of rope on the back, which when you jump
Oh
out,
wow.
pulls the chute for you.
Oh
So you have about 10 seconds and you jump out and you have to spread eagle and you have to go
yeah,
1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, check canopy. That's what they
yeah,
teach you to do. And you're
yeah,
supposed to then look up. But actually, the minute you jump, you go,
yeah,
is it over? And then
yeah.
that's about 10
Yeah.
seconds. And you look up, and luckily the canopy is open. Yeah.
Nice.
So that was a great adventure. And then you really only have about a minute and a half before you have to land. And it's
Wow.
one of those moments in my life where you're enjoying the experience, but actually it's inevitable that gravity will bring you to the earth. So you really have to focus, because if you don't think about how you land,
Yeah.
you hurt yourself. So very interesting on lots of levels jumping out of an aeroplane.
So when so how did that bring you the epiphany, or how did that correlate to getting started with your entrepreneur journey? Like, because I did skydiving, I think one of the things, and it's not about skydiving, just want to put it out, but I think my perspective was when I was jumping, I only did skydiving once. I loved it, and I was like, sometimes in life there's no going back. So if you do something, don't half-ass it, just commit, right? So want to get into your entrepreneur journey, how did that pave the way, or what were the aftermath events?
Yeah. So the reason I jumped out of the plane was I'd won a place to go from the UK to Australia on a project called Operation Rally. And that was going to cost £2,000. This is back in 1985. Earning by the hour at the time, about £3.50, selling toys in a department store. Imran, I was never going to make enough money because I had to raise the money in like 3 months, or else I was going to miss the window to go to Australia, right? So the epiphany was, if I keep working for someone else, I'm never going to make my big goal, right? Because it's, you work this many hours, you get this many pounds or dollars. And it was at that moment I thought, well, I have to do something differently, right? I have to find a way to make money outside of the parameters of being an employee. And I just had this idea that if I did something sponsored, I'd have to do something different than another bike ride or another walk, because there was no real challenge. So for people to sponsor me to go on a trip, it was like, why would they, right? Why would they do that? And I needed to get people outside of my personal circle, because my personal circle wasn't big enough and rich enough to pay the money I needed. No one back then was really jumping out of airplanes. I mean, now people, it's on the videos and YouTube and so on. But at the time, it was pretty, basically you did it if you're in the military, but it wasn't, something that people were doing very regularly back in those days. So I found something that would create shock and anxiety in the minds of people that I wanted to get money from, because it was by doing something that was plainly outside of my comfort zone and out of their comfort zone that they could buy into my journey. And often as an entrepreneur, that's what we have to do, right? We need to create a situation that may not be comfortable for us, but it's also helping our customers move out of a place of discomfort, and they get involved in the same journey as us as entrepreneurs, right? That's why they take a risk on us, that they believe in the product before maybe it's finished and so on. So I went to everybody that came to my store, even customers that were buying toys from my store. I asked them to sponsor me. So from an entrepreneurial point of view, I was pitching, Imran. I was pitching, you don't know who I am. There's really nothing in it for you but making a complete stranger accomplish their goals, right? And often as an entrepreneur, you're asking people who don't necessarily need what you've built so far, but you believe that they would enjoy it once they've got it, to invest in you and your dream. So for £5 or £10, I was getting people to invest in me accomplishing something. And then what I did was I realized that the person who started at the top of the page, they set the price. So I started raising money by saying, put what you can. Wrong, right? That's like saying, pay me what you can. Then what I started to do is I put down £10 and the name of somebody at the first line of my sponsorship form every day, right? And then people would come and they'd go, oh, wow, this guy's already put £10. I said, yeah, you can put 10 if you like. 5 will do, but 10 would be nice. So I learned about framing the price. Think about it. Now we go, well, what do you want to buy from me? Let me help you with the pricing. So as an entrepreneur, if you let people set the price for you, they want it for free. Right? So I learned then about setting pricing and about negotiating. And the final thing I learned was around the close, right? Sponsor me, £10 would be nice. But a lot of people lose the sale, like at the shopping cart, as it were, when the customer goes, well, yeah, maybe I'll come back later. Oh, well, I'm right? Well, I'm just looking around, right? So then the learning was, how do you close them? How do you get them to put their money down? And they'd say things like, well, but what if I don't see you after you've done the jump? How will I know? Okay, so I'd say, well, if you give me the money now and your address, I'll send you a picture, right? So what I had to do is to start to overcome objections. Most people thought, well, that's kind of kind of cagey for a 17-year-old lad to be asking me like this. I'll give him the money for his chutzpah.
Yeah.
But you could see then you've done a complete cycle,
Hmm.
right? You've put together a proposition, you've priced it, you've closed. In this particular case, it was me jumping out of an airplane, right? But so if you can, as an entrepreneur, start to understand how you scope something, how you get people to buy into the vision of it,
Yeah.
and then how to close on it and get the cash in. It doesn't matter if you're jumping out of an airplane or went to Singapore and started my PR business, or I'm
Yeah.
importing cars to China. Actually, the model is the same, Imran. You have to understand how to get someone to buy into your vision, go across their objections, and get them to give you the cash.
That's actually very true, Jim. Like I did two startups. The last one was in creator space, and I think that was one of the big things. Like when I was going about selling to creators that, hey, there's a way you can monetize, engage your fans. It goes through the funneling that you're talking about, or like the stages, right? And may that not be this, let's take another way. When you're going for a job as well, which is not entrepreneurial though, but it's the same aspect, right? As well. Like, hey, this is what I have to offer. What are your objections? You try to clear their doubts. So it's very interesting how you connect that. Actually, I kind of like it in that way because more not only philosophical, but it's actually sometimes you get an epiphany. So when it came to your first entrepreneurial journey, when you started your first business, like what was that about? What were some challenges you faced and something that you want to share with people around that? And then we can go a bit deeper.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first, like proper business was the public relations company, EastWest Public Relations in Singapore in
Hmm.
1995. And I went to Singapore because I saw that there was an emerging market for digital technology in music and television, which is the business I was in. And there wasn't anybody serving the hardware manufacturers at the time with the very few media that were in Asia, but also that were sending stories back. So really, as someone going to Asia to find an agency and to try and do PR in Asia, I found there wasn't one.
Yeah.
And then I just looked at how much the agencies that I met wanted to charge me for doing the work they didn't really know how to do. And I will actually, if I got two clients, I'd be making as much money, if not more, than working for someone in England.
Yeah.
So I just decided I would do it myself, and I went.
So did that like and that when was this back?
This is
Uh,
1995. Yeah.
so how much of that has changed now? Like when you look at from the entrepreneur perspective, right? Like I have to say this. I throw a rock in the Bay Area, there's someone doing a startup, right? Like probably my neighbor is, right? Compared to in the 90s and 80s, I was barely not even like, there to even know that census, must I say. But how different is being an entrepreneur then, right? An entrepreneur doesn't have to be tech, FYI. I just want to call that out. It could be any small, big business. There's so many of these businesses around. But like, how is it different from being an entrepreneur or being a founder back in the 90s versus today when you look at it?
You're making me feel very old here, Imran. For anyone that's
Sorry. No, but like,
yeah,
but
well,
that's
in my day, I think there's a couple of things. One is the impact of technology has to be said first, right? That in 1995, we had the beginnings of the internet, right? We had CompuServe, we had a 2.4K modem, 2.4K modem. Okay? We had a small black screen Toshiba laptop. And to get the internet, I would dial Australia from Singapore. Okay, no attachments, no images. And when you corresponded with people, you did it by fax.
yeah. Yeah.
So the business model, Imran, was that it was easy for me to sell a company in England or America doing PR in Asia because it was cheaper for them to pay me to send a fax to the media in Tokyo, Manila, Hanoi. It was cheaper for them to pay me in Singapore to send faxes from Singapore than it was for them to send faxes from California to those cities, because we had long distance phone charges. Okay. So the business model in those days for pretty much every business was predicated on proximity. If you think about it, we all had to be close or in the market.
Yeah.
And my proposition for EastWest Public Relations at the time was access to Asia. I would bridge the gap culturally, but also physically by being in the region. This would be probably the most significant difference, because today you're in San Mateo, I'm in Wiltshire.
Yeah.
And we have video and we have audio in real time.
Yeah.
Right. And I've started a podcast academy to train podcast guests, people that would like to be guests on podcasts. And at the end, I'll give a coupon out for anyone that's interested to take the course. Any of your listeners that want to be podcast guests, I'll give them a coupon. So do stick around. But if we look at podcasting, for example, it can be global and instant because of the technology. So as an entrepreneur, you no longer have to be in a particular place to serve clients, because Amazon, for example, enables someone to buy something and have it delivered to them regardless of where they are, by a merchant who could be somewhere totally different. So I think the biggest change would be the impact of technology, which is very enabling, really. And the other aspect of technology is that the availability of SaaS products now that fulfill so many of the business processes.
Yeah.
So, for example, in 1995, to get paid, people would send me a check, right? And I would go to the bank on Shenton Way in Singapore with a check on a Friday, right?
Yeah.
And you'd be ringing a client and they'd send it by post to me in Singapore, and I'd have to wait 2 weeks and I'd go, right. But of course now, as a solopreneur, like for my course, for example, it's the academy.unnoticed.cc, people can buy the course anywhere online. I can have variable pricing, so people in India can pay a purchasing parity price for the course. So I can have variable pricing all online, and everyone can pay in their local currency through Stripe or through Wise. So it's extremely liberating, right? And that applies whether it's CRM, whether it's voice over IP, whether it's merchandise cataloging. Imran, it's absolutely liberating, because there isn't a part of running a business that isn't now available and accessible at very low price or free to an entrepreneur. And that, I would say, is the most significant point of difference.
Here's one question I have, and then I want to move more towards your book, because I really want to talk more about your book in terms of, what it's talking about, the interviews you did, all that good stuff. But one question I have, with accessibility of these tools for entrepreneurs, don't you believe the competition has gone up? The reason for that is, like, now every person can be a founder, every person can be an entrepreneur. Like, how to put this? When things are accessible, which is a good, right? Nobody will be like it's bad, but it also drives a little bit of the market. Like, now I can get cheaper service, so why I'm gonna pay someone premium when they are doing premium work? Like,
yes, I think, Imran, you raise a very, very good point, and that is, location is no longer a point of competitive advantage. Okay, so proximity to the client is no longer a source of advantage. And nor, by the way, is ignorance. So a lack of knowledge in the marketplace about alternatives is no longer a source of competitive advantage. In the Again, back in the 90s, we had the beginnings of Google, at the beginnings of Yahoo. People would meet you at a networking event. They wouldn't have heard of another PR firm because I was the only guy on the trade show floor, right? But now, quick Google search, and it's hundreds, but also the person in Hanoi can have a video call with the person in New York, right? So what happens is that we all have to be, if you like, hyper competitive
Hmm.
in our own space, because the traditional advantages of location and customer ignorance no longer exist. So we really have to then be even more proactive and more professional due to the democratization of entrepreneurship by technology.
I kind of, yes, this is one thing I wanted to really get your perspective on, because I do feel like things becoming accessible, like the iPhone, right? Like it got accessible. I have my philosophy. If some things become accessible, which are really good for the society, I think they should. But there's also other side that then its value is like, you got it. Like imagine if Lamborghini was accessible to everyone, it won't be a Lamborghini then. Like you know what I'm going, what I'm trying. I'm not saying a luxury good, but like if Ferrari was in everyone's house, then it's not. Then all these car manufacturers are going to be like, we got to build something new. It has to be very competitive. So it's loses not only its value. I'm comparing car to skills. I don't know how, but I'm trying to say like when things become really accessible, I have my opinion on like you have to be ultra competitive, but then also like it loses its weight a little
Well,
bit.
I'm not sure I'd agree with you if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Just because the issue of whether something's a premium
yeah,
product priced around the Veblen theory of if it's highly priced, it'll be highly valued, regardless of its intrinsic value, right? That's the Veblen
yes,
effect, where you talk about Lamborghini or Ferrari or Rolls-Royce.
yeah,
It's not intrinsically worth that much more as a car,
correct.
but people pay for the perceived value of the brand,
Yeah,
right? That's, in my view, slightly different to this mass availability of products and services through technology. Because if we take something like telehealth and telemedicine, for example,
yeah,
accessibility through connectivity
yeah,
can only be good. But what it
that's true.
also means is that we can access now through AI and some of these new tools information and advice that previously people would have been needed to deliver. So this is the next challenge. And the question is whether that technology is going to be of equal value to the consumer. And we mentioned my book under the Unnoticed Entrepreneur Volume 1 and Volume 2. The people that have been on the on the mic with me on my podcast, and I've got over 450 interviews now, a lot of them are innovators in AI, and they are creating tools for writing, for marketing, for sentiment analysis, for example, in emails, using AI, because AI is really, really good at understanding large data sets, data at scale, better than humans can do it.
Yeah,
And so what we're then getting, if we use it properly, is we're getting AI to help us to understand large data so that we can make better decisions.
yeah, I agree. So there there is a side where, when things are democratized, they do help. I know where you're coming from. So I do agree with that. I just felt like when it's like there's so many entrepreneurs or so many one an investor has to be very, very, very diligent to weed out. Yeah, let's put it this way. Sam Bankman-Friedman, right? The SBF, the crypto
Mm.
guy. I don't want to make the episode about him, but I'm just saying, right? You have that, then you have Coinbase. And people are like, FTX is the future and everything. And then you're like, it was accessible. He had the access. Of course, he also fooled the investors. I don't know how. I've never been able to do that. So, but that's where I was going at. But I want to more now focus on your book. So you have volume 2 coming out, right? The Unnoticed Entrepreneur, and that's being published by Wiley, right?
Yes, it's by Wiley under the
Right.
Capstone brand. Yeah. So this was the
Nice.
the first volume. And maybe, from an entrepreneurial point of view, maybe Imran, would it be of interest if I share the journey of how I created
Yeah, that's
books?
actually, yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
because for anyone listening, the message really is that anybody can create and publish a book. To your point about democratization of entrepreneurship, for example, but also democratization of publishing through tools
Yeah.
like lulu.com, for example, or Kindle, where you
Hmm.
can self-publish through KDP's program. The process that I went through, which I share because it worked for me and it may work for others, is I started with the premise of finding out what other people think about a particular topic and getting them onto my podcast, structuring it so that each show was 20 to 25 minutes, which equates to about 1,000 to 1,400 words. And I basically had the same set of questions for different kinds of entrepreneurs, but the format and the structure of the interviews was the same.
Hmm.
So that then when I did transcription using actually initially 2 years ago, people in the Philippines, and then the beginnings of AI, and now fully AI, I was able to create a book of 80,000 words and 50 interviews by having a process. And then what I did was I self-published that by using a platform called Dabble Writer and then a VA in the Philippines. And we were able to collaborate because it's a tool built for long form writing as opposed to Google Docs, which people try and use.
Yeah.
So by using Dabble Writer, I was able to have my VA in the Philippines to work with me on collecting information, articles, and
Hmm.
so on together. And then we were able to export that and give that to some people on Upwork in Ukraine to do the layout. The whole exercise cost me $300-400, and then I self-published that on Kindle. Now, it's not the most beautiful book, and it was, I could tell you, full of some errors. But the second lesson is 80-20 rule. It is better to have something published than wait for it to get better and better. So what I did was I published the first one and I entered an award, the British Business Book Award,
Nice.
£87. I really didn't think I had a chance to get anywhere with it. My wife said, you didn't really write it because you interviewed all these people and it's their thoughts. But I obviously, I structured it
Yeah.
into the format and into the narrative that I wanted. And I write chapters in between to explain the journey of entrepreneurs, explain to other entrepreneurs how to get noticed for free, right? And that's the concept behind the Unnoticed, the podcast and the academy for teaching people to be guests and so on. The book was a finalist in the Business Book Awards. So I went to London, sat next to, as my wife would call, probably real authors, right? But what people didn't realize is I produced a book in 3 months, right?
Nice. Nice.
Nice, right? So, and other people have spent years,
Yeah.
but mine was part of an overall brand story, right? Podcast, book, events, consulting, and now training courses. As a result of being a finalist, I put pictures, of course, of me being a finalist on social media. And as a result, Wiley has a commissioning agent based in the UK, and she saw me on LinkedIn and said, hey, I see you've published this book. Would you be interested to have us look at publishing the book for you? Okay. So I went from this, literally actually, Imran, sitting in a garden shed producing these podcasts to collating and making a book and designing it in Canva myself,
Yeah.
putting it on Dabble Writer, putting it into KDP, entering it into an award. Very low cost, relatively quick, but it elevated my brand in a way that couldn't have been
Yeah.
done before. So then with Wiley, they said we want to publish the book. So that's great, but I actually have already 3 books because I already have 150 interviews, right? Now I have 450 interviews. So I said,
Wow.
actually, I've already got volume 2 ready. And so we agreed to a 3-book deal because they like the concept behind the brand of helping the unnoticed entrepreneur find cost-effective ways to get noticed.
This is actually very inspiring, at least to me personally,
Great.
because I always wanted to write a book, and I never did. And my book would have been about mostly my personal journey. But I want to go back to the conversation about your book. So you talked more about branding, right? Like it's basically about how you position yourself. And I think a lot of companies, not even entrepreneurs, are struggling with that, right? So what were some like I don't want you to give the whole gist of your book because we want people to read it, but like could you like share some key insights of what did you see that or extracted that? What are some um benefits of branding, that you know of, but also like the companies are not doing that you've seen that consistently, like everybody's doing the same mistake?
First of all, Imran, I'm more than happy to give everything away because the point of the Unnoticed Entrepreneur brand and me in my role in my stage of life now is to share unconditionally, right? This is not about gated content where I try and be clever and get you to buy something you don't really want, right? So first of all, I'm more than happy for people to hear. And in fact, these are all articles that then appear on my website, but I
Wow.
curate them and collate them. And inside the book, I took the decision to include the LinkedIn and email addresses of all the people that are included in the book, right? So it's actually a directory of 50 entrepreneurs from Australia to Singapore to India to China to Canada to America to Germany, right? They're all in there because my purpose is to share what I know, but also have this amazing network from living and working for 25 years as an international entrepreneur, right? So I can channel these ideas for you and for your listeners in a way that will hopefully help you to overcome some of the mistakes that I've certainly made and some of these other entrepreneurs have made. So that's the first point. So at the unnoticed.cc, people can see where the books are and they can see the 750 episodes and hundreds of articles. Your question was about some recurring themes. There are absolutely some recurring themes. I've interviewed over 450 entrepreneurs now, and I've had the CEO of Dale Carnegie, for example, on the show, and people like Brad Sugars, who runs Action Coach, on the show. But I've also had lots of people like Akshay, for example, a photographer in India who, during lockdown, decided he would photograph himself every day. And he did that for 365 days.
Oh,
And as a result, made this amazing compendium of himself and was able to publish those pictures. And people then said, what a brilliant photographer you are. Could you photograph me? Right. So what Brad Sugars and the Dale Carnegie CEO and Akshay and all these other entrepreneurs have in common is that they put themselves into the business, that they take the effort to be front and center of the business. Even if they're feeling tired, even if they feel jaded, even if they feel a bit confused, the recurring theme is that they are all passionate about what they're doing and they're tireless about making sure that everybody in the stakeholder groups of potential customers, existing customers, employees, investors, partners, that everybody is as passionate or at least as aligned with the vision as possible. So if there's a recurring theme, it is that the guardian of the vision of the business is the entrepreneur. Now, you'd think, well, that's obvious, isn't it? Of course they are. The recurring theme when it comes to a mistake that entrepreneurs have made because I ask, what mistake have you made? The recurring theme for entrepreneurs is when they've lost sight of the vision and the role that they play as the guardian of that vision. They raise money and go, well, now I'm involved in shareholder relations, or well, I've got an extra office, so now I have people to do that kind of. I have a marketing department. That's their job to think of branding messages. So everyone that I've spoken to says the minute that they lose control, not in a day-to-day, I need to micromanage sense, but that they cease to articulate and represent the vision of their business, the business goes awry. That's the first one. Do you want me to move on, or should we? Do you
No,
want
no,
to?
no. No, no,
Okay,
no.
so that's the first one.
Yeah.
So be very, very clear if you're running a business, at whatever stage of your business, that you're clear about who you're serving and why you're serving them. The second recurring theme is that a business doesn't stay the same as it grows, and nor does the role of the entrepreneur. We as entrepreneurs have to mature in line with the maturity of the business. And what often happens is a business grows at a different rate to the maturity of the entrepreneur, because the business doesn't grow as quickly as the entrepreneur maybe, or the business grows faster than the entrepreneur in sort of spiritual, emotional, mental terms. So a central issue for entrepreneurs is understanding the rate of growth and what needs to be done differently. So for example, when you run a startup, you do a little bit of everything. There's only three parts of a business. There's winning business, there's managing business, and there's delivering business. There's only over three. They're called different things. There's actually three functions of any company. As Peter Drucker says, the only role of a company is to generate revenue, right? To generate profit.
Yeah.
Anything else actually is excess. But at the beginning, you do all of those things. And then there comes a time when you get 8 to 10 people around you and you have a slightly different role. Lots of people are doing little bits and pieces. And you can manage all those people. When you get to about 12 to 15 people, and especially if they're distributed by location, you need people in place to manage the processes that other people are plugging into. Because the business transitions from being, if you like, organic and almost sort of a biological response to what customers need, it starts to need to have processes where people that can't be day to day with you need to have things to follow so that the customer experience is consistent, that the contracts are in place, that the branding is in place. So a second theme in the book is that as a business grows, the role of the entrepreneur needs to change, and they have to be good at understanding what to retain and what to delegate. But at the same time, remembering that they need to be the guardian of that vision. And that's why a lot of companies don't manage to go across that divide from 15 to 30 to 40 people. That middle ground is very dangerous because you don't have enough cash to really pay for the people that need to be involved to actually become a cost to the business. So that's a second theme of the business. And there's a third one, because there are more, but the third one, which I will share, the bigger your company becomes, the more consistent your communication needs to be.
Yeah.
So the larger your company becomes, the more consistent your communication needs to be. In my emails, I have the strapline, keep on communicating, because as your business gets bigger, you have more customers, more suppliers, more vendors, more investors. Your ability to communicate, or for them to communicate with you directly, diminishes because by definition, you have less time. Ironically enough, as your business gets bigger, you need to communicate even more because there are more people that you need to keep aligned. So that would be a third theme. And there are themes in the book from each of these about the way they use different technology. They play that role differently. But those would be three broad themes then, Imran, I think, that would come out in the book.
That's actually where I actually want to double click or even like agree as much as I can, because this is something even I've realized, like when your company, where you're starting as an entrepreneur, as a founder, your role really evolves. First, you're building the product, then you're selling the product, then you're selling to pitch the product to the investors, and your role evolve. And when you get, like, I was able to raise 500K from my last startup, and then then I had a team across the world, like 17 people, right? And then all of a sudden, it was going to manage people, and I had to really bring myself back. They need to be able to have a process so they understand what we delivered, what I validated that worked with the customer. Don't mess it up, right? And I think that's a hard line to balance. Um, I don't want to go be deep, but there are a lot of entrepreneurs last year we saw, like, they grew and they're like, hey, you know what? We have to clean everything up, or their processes were wrong, or it was all over TechCrunch with all these other companies. With, of course, it's also economical downturn as well. But I'm just like saying, like, there is something that I've seen consistently. It's a hard line to balance. But to that point, and I know we're gonna come at time a little bit. One last thing, what is the trend, Jim, that you're looking at? Like when you had these interviews, you spoke, you also wrote the volume two. Now it's available for pre-order. I'm actually gonna drop links for everything that Jim has, so nobody, you know, leaves it out. So I will drop it on your website and your pre-order link as well. But what are some upcoming trends that you're looking at now, based on what you covered in your book and the volume two? And then lastly, what advice would you say for entrepreneur, any founder? And it doesn't have to be anyone tech, like could be someone like my sister. She wants to really do sell cakes, right? She loves doing that, but it's hard in New York. So that being said, like, what advice could you give to any entrepreneur that would really stick? So two questions for me.
Okay, the first one is about trends, Imran. You mean in
Yeah.
general or with marketing communications or
With
tech?
yeah. So with marketing communication, the branding aspect, because I'm really bullish on that stuff. I think branding really stands out, right? And the communication and marketing. What are you seeing some upcoming trends in that perspective?
Okay, so I think from an entrepreneur point of view, trends certainly include number one, the importance of managing your personal brand. That companies are increasingly thinking about not just the company brand, but the brand of the entrepreneur. And as we've seen, really, an individual who's the CEO or founder of a company can make or destroy a brand kind of overnight if they don't manage their own personal brand. We've seen this where, for example, people went to the Capitol Hill riots, right? And people then saw the person who was the CEO of a company, right? And he was
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
and overnight his business died. So first of all, a key trend is that we have to be proactive and considered in managing the personal brand as well as the company brand. They are not divisible. You cannot say, well, I have a company brand, I don't have to worry about my own. So the first trend is you have to be the guardian of your own personal brand, in addition to the guardian of the company brand. So whatever you post on Facebook or X or TikTok needs to be seen in the context of someone somewhere might check you out because they're buying into the company. They want to know who the people are making the decisions in the company. So that's the first trend. The second trend is going to be around video. And I was at an event recently, and the head of YouTube UK was there, and they've launched podcasts onto YouTube. And if you have any young people in your life, like my daughters, 14 and 16, they have YouTube on as their default player for music, video, and audio. And listening to the head of YouTube UK, she was saying YouTube's vision basically is a unified platform, right? where you carry around on your phone and your iPad with YouTube open, because it will play for you a podcast, a video, an audiobook. It'll become unified. So we have to think then about how we can embrace video, because the picture superiority effect means that people naturally gravitate towards pictures and moving pictures. So one of the guests on my show also was talking about this. So if you're writing text now and you think it's enough, it won't be enough. If you're doing audio only, it's okay, but it won't be enough. So the second big trend will be that whether we like it or not, we have to think about how we represent ourselves and our products, by the way, in moving images. Okay, so that'll be the second thing. The third one is counterintuitive, Imran, to what I've just said. And that is going to be the importance of human to human marketing. Because what I'm seeing is that the advent of AI generated content, be it videos on platforms like Veed, for example, or Lumen 5, or whether it's generating articles using, whether it's using Claude, for example, or Jasper, any of these.
Yeah.
We're going to get to the stage where it's not about can you create content, because the AI can do that. It'll be, can you create human content that has a heart and a soul? And actually, that's why as individuals, we need to still be very present in the creation process. And we need to be present in meetings and going to visit customers and doing things like going to conferences and trade shows, or like if your sister's making cakes, for her to be seen somewhere giving out cakes or with the customers. Because what's going to happen, what is happening, is we're getting a depersonalization of content, because the scale has got so great and the frequency of it has got so prolific, that actually what's happening is people are going, you know what, I'm going to turn all that off. What I'd love to do is go and meet you. I want to come and have a human engagement again. So we're going to have, you have to manage your personal brand online. You have to think about video. And then slightly counterintuitively, you need to then be available to be seen in human form with the people that matter to your business. So what I think is important there is that we're not, in my view, we're not on an evolutionary path to where business is done, if you like, by AI.
Yeah.
It creates the content, it sends it out, it does the funnels for you, people buy. I actually think that we're going to counterintuitively have people going, that's great, but now I'd like to see who is serving me. Not for every product category. For commodity items, you won't necessarily care. But if you're in a service business, you'll be able to differentiate yourself by being human. And I think that's a fundamentally positive message. And if I come back to my book, The Unnoticed Entrepreneur, or with the podcast academy, the academy.unnoticed.cc, entrepreneurs getting onto podcasts now is the most effective way for them to market themselves.
Yeah.
And that's because we can have a human conversation. And ultimately, I think that's a humanistic approach to marketing will be the one that is sustainable, Imran.
Yeah, no. I'm very bullish with what you're saying, because content will become accessible. AI will help with all of that. That's all good. But the human factor is now going to come at a premium experience. Like it has to be, because if everything is AI, like right at this point, there could be an AI avatar. I'm not surprised that could happen. Like I have the Apple Vision Pro and I'm like, that avatar exists, though it's like clunky a little bit, but it will get there. I'm not surprised. But the fact that you can be in person, be with people, I do agree 10,000% that that's one of the reason I start podcasting, because I need people to see me. That it's not some AI writing stuff. It's hello, I exist. But just one last thing, and then we have time. Any advice for entrepreneurs out there in this tough market as well? I think let's focus on the tough market. Any advice for them?
Well, I think I would say, first of all, I lived in China for 15 years and in age 25. The Chinese have a saying really, which is that, every crisis is an opportunity, right? And hard times are what defines and identifies true entrepreneurs. The great entrepreneurs succeed when everyone else is not succeeding. The ones that don't succeed are the ones that probably shouldn't be entrepreneurs, because it's not just that it's plain sailing, therefore we're all entrepreneurs, right? It's when the wind gets tough and turns that you see who really are great sailors, right? And the others need to head back to port. So first of all, I'd say that as an entrepreneur, whenever there's a structural change, a seismic change of any kind,
Mhm.
there's disruption. And it's the disruption that creates opportunities. And that's what we have to look for. In terms of advice, I wouldn't give advice. I was on a podcast recently. I said, I'd rather give an insight, Imran, because everyone's circumstances are different. So my advice
Yeah.
applies to what I've learned in my life journey, but it's different for your sister in New York doing cakes. So all I'd say is as an insight. As a kid, I had a poster on my wall of a skier jumping over a large boulder. There's a big whoosh of powder. It was from Boulder, Colorado, where I lived as a kid. And the headline on this poster was, "We accomplish in proportion to what we attempt." We accomplish in proportion to what we attempt. Just like jumping out of an airplane at 17 scared as all topsy, or that skier who presumably had a moment where they wondered where they were going to land. As an entrepreneur, we have to have a bigger vision of what we're trying to accomplish and be willing to accept the anxiety and the fear. Because if we don't take those challenges, if we don't have a big goal, actually, we won't attempt anything, ergo, we won't accomplish anything. So my insight over 25 years, and I've started businesses and suitcases in Singapore and China and India and the UK, it's a massive thrill to build something from nothing. And the journey is its own reward. So don't benchmark yourself against people that are taking security and guaranteed cash.
Yeah.
Benchmark yourself against your own goals and have in your mind, for me, we only accomplish in proportion to what we attempt, Imran.
Wow. I like it because I think a lot of people, such as myself, we do look. I'm very competitive when it comes to anything. I try to always like compete. Like if I'm doing podcasts, I'm like, I gotta get more because this person started. And sometimes that's actually never, it's good, but not really great. And what you're saying is like, come back to yourself, look at what you're gonna do. And when you do it, just focus on your journey and just go in, right? Like just, I hope I'm enunciating it correctly. Or,
No, Imran, you're absolutely right. And the reason for this is very simple. Other people get the results that they get with the resources that they've got
yeah,
and the effort that they put in.
yeah,
Unless you have identical resources and you can put
yes,
identical effort in, you can't expect to get the same results. What happens in society is that we say, oh, everyone should have this kind of car. Everyone should have this kind of lifestyle. Everyone should. And actually, it's not accounting for the fact that we all start in very different places. We all have very different skill sets. Some people have better mental acuity. Some have got better physical acuity. Some are looking after a family friend or a member of the family.
yeah,
How can they possibly be judged? So society creates a set of circumstances because it would like us all to behave in a certain way. And one of the hallmarks of being an entrepreneur is to say, fine, you all behave that way. That's up to you. But actually, I have my own mind. I have my own vision of how I want to live my life. I want to have my own goals. That's the hallmark of being an entrepreneur, as you're saying. I don't buy into the collective mania. What matters is this is my journey. This is how I serve the audience, for example, the unnoticed entrepreneur. This is how I serve. If I compare myself with others, I'm not winning. I have to compare myself with my own goals and my own beliefs. because
Yeah.
ultimately I have to look at myself in the mirror, not them. So Imran, if there's an insight after all these years, it's to free yourself from expectation, because that's a terrible burden to carry. Enjoy what you've accomplished with the skills and the resources and the application that you're bringing. And you're doing a wonderful job with your podcast and your career. And I celebrate you for that. And enjoy what you've created. And don't worry about what anyone else has created. But just as an entrepreneur, you are not alone. There are many of us out there that are trying to build something better than we found it. And that is reward in itself.
And on that note, I'm gonna not even add anything. This is amazing. This truly is amazing. Um, Thank you, Jim. Like this where carries weight, so I don't want to even give perspective. I felt it. I felt the weight of that conversation. So I'm gonna make this into a content, especially this, and put it out because people need to hear this as many times they can, especially in these hard times or whatever is happening in the financial world. But thank you, Jim. I'm gonna drop in the link for his book, for his academy, for his podcast, so you can get access. And you did mention about the tokens or something.
Yes. So
Um,
what if anyone is interested in coming onto the podcast academy, it's academy.unnoticed.cc. Imran will put that in. I'll give you a coupon. It's Pioneer 100. And that'll give you free access to the course. There's over 65 lessons on how you can get prepared for being a podcast guest, how to pitch, how to use a VA to get you onto podcasts, and then also how to do interviews, and then also how to use AI tools to repurpose your content. It's quite an end-to-end. I ran a PR firm for 25 years. I've done over 450 interviews. I know one or two things. I'd love to share them with you and your community. So it'll be Pioneer 100, and Imran will be able to put that link for you in the show notes.
well, thank you, Jim, for giving me your time. And I know it's probably late, or I don't know, is the evening time maybe for you, or
It's okay, but the children have come home and the dog's looking for his dinner. So I will have to
okay.
let you go,
Yeah.
Imran. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Jim.
so much for allowing me to share my thoughts. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you.